So weekend work, what we're going to look at is really how you start your journey into Power BI. And the beginning point for most people is going to be Excel. You've got lots of analysts experience in Excel, right? And that's, well, how do I jump from where I'm really comfortable to where I've got no clue whatsoever? And invariably, you're going to start with the likes of Power Query and Power Pivot. So we're going to combine the two weekend work videos for this week into one, right? And actually look at that stepped journey. We went through step one in the video on Tuesday, and this time we're going through step two and step three really today. So stay tuned, and keep with us. All right, lads and lasses, weekend work. You can see I've got some beautiful images behind us of what we can do with Power BI and Excel, right? What I'm going to do is let's cut over into Excel and let's start a little bit of a demo going through it, Champion. So here we are in Excel. And what we need to do is go to the Data tab and then go into Data, From File, and want to pick From Folder. And I'd always recommend doing From Folder if you want to do any level of automation with your data. That's going to bring you up a little window to put in the folder path. We're just going to put in one from my local computer. When we click OK, it'll go away and it'll get the contents of that folder and show you it. And at this point, you just want to hit Transform Data. So here's our list now in the query editor window proper. What you could do is you could use the various columns to filter down your table or your folder set that you had until you've just got one or many spreadsheets or source files, depending on what you want to do. But we're just going to combine them all by clicking the Combine Files icon. Gives us a little demo of the first file. This is what I found kind of thing. Just click OK, and it's going to go away and create a function and some parameter set that's then going to go through and process that folder's contents into one single table. So here's my table. The next thing you would need to do is just to start to go through and actually do any work you need to do, processing you need to do on the columns. And note that we've always got a column at the beginning which relates to the original file that this row of data came from. What we've got here is we've got two date columns, the order date and the ship date. And for these, we're just going to do a demo on roughly what we would do as a sample just to fix dates. And in this case, they're broken because they come from a US date format and our Power BI or Excel, is expecting UK date format. So what we need to do is right click on it and select to split the column by delimiter. And you see by default, it was at a backslash. We just click OK and it'll split that into three columns. Column 2 is going to be the days. So we're just going to label it as day, and we'll label 1 as month and 3 as year, just so that it makes more sense when we do the next step or the join step that we're going to do in a minute. Because what we have to do first is make sure that those three columns, all three of them, are set to be text. Because M, and that's the language behind Query Editor and Power Query, is case sensitive and also is very much data type sensitive. So we need to now set a date value from the three text columns. So we want a date from text. So what we do is we're going to go to add a column, add a custom column. And in this case, we're going to give it a name, ship date. And then what we want to do is write in date.fromText and then open brackets. And then we're going to pick our day column. So that would be shipdate.day and speech and slash and month slash and year. Close brackets. So we've now got that set up. And that's now, if we click that and change the type, you see we can have that set to a date. And that works really well. So one last time, we'll just go through and quickly do that over in the other column. So that's us now got our two date columns that we needed. The last thing we want to do is just to go through and remove those 6 intermediary columns that we had. This is a nice thing that you can do with Query Editor, is when you don't need things anymore, you can remove them. Just remove them. So we've now got a table of data that we can use and that's going to work perfectly for us for our analysis. So what we're going to do is go under the home, under the close and load, you'll actually see close and load 2. If we click that, what we're now going to do is do different. So in the first video, and we did on Tuesday, we actually had table selected. We're just going to click the just create the connection now. So from an Excel perspective, it's just creating a connection. But we're going to tick the box to include it in the data model. So it's going to load the data, but into a version of analysis services that's locked and buried within Excel. So it's not really a table of data that people can access, but it's going to be within the Excel file itself. And if we click Manage the Data Model, what you'll see is a Power Pivot version of the data. So we see a table of data, but it's locked. We couldn't edit the data from here. And at the bottom of the window, we have the calculation area, and that's where you would write some DAX statements. So how do we write our first DAX statements? Let's try. So if we're going to do an orders measure, so a count of the orders. So if we write in orders, let's see if we can zoom in a bit on this, make it easier to see. There we go. This is going to be a distinct count. So a distinct count of order number or order ID. Okay. And what we do when we're writing these things is, oh, I see what a typo, distinct count. There we go. So we put the table name. So the table name is Excel. And then in the squared brackets, we've got the column, which is saying we're going to work with a column. So we've got a table and a column address effectively in that measure. And that's good practice when you're writing any DAX. So that's our orders. So what about our profit? So if we look at profit, let's zoom in on that again. And then we've got to do a colon equals, and this is going to be a sum this time. So sum of Excel total profit. And you can see within IntelliSense, I can simplify things for myself, and that'll help me get to the end result. So that's our profit. Then what about revenue? Revenue is useful to know. So let's start a revenue one. So I've now got me profit. But let's format that number first. We want to make sure that's financial, don't we? So on the top, you can see I can pick currency. So I'm going to pick currency. In this case, I'm just going to pick UK. I'm not sure what the currency is from this file. What you could also do is actually right-click on the measure name. And there you can format the number as well. So we can click format, and I'll just use that just to mark and remove decimal points or decimal places. Next thing we need, let's look at revenue. So we've got revenue. Let's zoom in on that again. Oh. So revenue is going to equal sum of total revenue, isn't it? And again, Excel total revenue in close brackets. Now, one of the things I wanted you to be aware of is, once we've sorted this as a currency format again, is that DAX is self-referential. So, or you can reference other DAX measures within measures. So if we now do like a percentage profit, yeah, we would do that by dividing our profit by our revenue. So we get a percentage. What percentage of our revenue is profit? if that makes sense. So percentage profit equals divide, which is the safe divide function in case you have something that would be a divide by 0 or you'd have an error. We're going to put in profit, and you see it puts that in just in squared brackets because it's actually a measure rather than something else. And you can see we can start the squared brackets and type in revenue for the next one, and that will work. And then we can choose to give it an optional final value in case of an error. So we put 0. Actually, maybe let's change that. Let's put in blank. So that would be where we're saying there's going to be a blank rather than a null or an error. It's just going to be blank. And you can see IntelliSense is at work, and we have words highlighted across our DAX measure. And let's make this one a percentage so that we know this is a percentage. It's not profit percentage. Now, just how complex can you get with your DAX? In here, some people say, well, this is just going to be lightweight, isn't it? I'm not going to be able to do much. But you can do all sorts. I can actually do some X functions in here as well. So let's look at an average X for our average profit. So what's the average profit percentage? So if we turn around and say average X of open brackets, and the table name, if you remember, is Excel. So we're just going to be Excel. So average X of Excel, comma, and effectively this is where we'd want to be doing that divide. But because it's an X function, we can just put in the columns. So we're going to do a divide, and we'll put in the column headings, which is total profit and by total revenue. Close the brackets. Close the brackets. So now we've done what would be considered a bit more of a complex measure, wouldn't it? And that's been quite happily accepted by essentially Excel or Power BI in sheep's clothing within your Excel spreadsheet world. So we click the button on the top left to go back to our workspace view in Excel. In Excel, to access the data model, we need to go and insert a pivot table. So insert pivot table, and you can see it now by default will tell you I'm going to bring it in from the data model. And here's where you see, here's my pivot table, and on the right hand side, you can see the table or tables that would relate to the data model that you've just written and built. So what we're going to do is we just drag a few things in, and we can start to experiment and see what can we do with this data set that we've built. So we start to get this built. Let's move the values over to the rows, and then let's drop in the count. And we can now see we've got a really great starter for 10, haven't we? This is what you can do with Power BI within Excel. And quickly and easily, you can build some quite comprehensive business dashboards this way. So what do you reckon then, eh? I hope you can see that Power BI within Excel, it's not like a failure. It's actually very good. And as you can see from the screenshots behind me, right, you can do some quite in-depth visuals with it. Yes, you're limited to pivot tables and pivot charts, but that's not a fundamental limit as much as you'd think it could be. You can still do an awful lot with those two core components. And especially when you consider what you can see here is we've got a slicer set as well in use, which enables the viewer to go and change and say, well, I just want to look at this period for this area, get quite interactive with it. And the challenge is then Excel, and it just does not run with all this amazingly well. It's not optimized to run with analysis services in this way. It does it, but it can get complicated quite quickly. Well, not so much complicated, it slows down at some point, and it's just like going off a cliff. When that happens, you've got no choice but to move into Power BI. Right? But hopefully people have started to see that there's more that you can get out from that interactivity. You also can't automate this. So you'll find that everyone who's got it is going to have to go and hit refresh every day, or whatever your reporting period is. They're going to need access to do it, or you're going to have to run it and then send it out to people. So it's a halfway house, definitely. It's a step further from where you are with Excel on its own and PowerPoint and something else, but it's not that fully interactive report pack that you want. But don't feel this is something that people are saying you shouldn't do. I believe very strongly that if you come from an Excel background and Excel's what you're used to, the jump to Power BI can be huge. So if you're starting out, we've got our super user community starting soon. Come over, join the super user community. Just links down below to Patreon. Patreon subscribers get access to it. Okay? And then we can start to work together and build up your skill set, and we can share experiences and find out really what's going on. How can we all help each other and become that little bit better? Because Power BI is as much about community as it's about anything else. So for now, take care, stay safe, everyone. And we'll catch us all next week. Ta-da.